Scott Sonneborn, do you want people to hate you as a writer? I mean, having an episode take place in Rainbow Falls and Spike trading a Power Ponies comic, that's my problem. But having a direct reference to Spike at Your Service? Spike at Your Service, one of the most hated episodes of the show. And yeah, Corey Powell made a reference to Showstoppers, which is up there in terms of hatred, but that was something you could only notice if you were really paying attention. Scott Sonneborn was pretty much saying, Spike at Your Service happened, now deal with it. But besides that, let's take a look at this episode. You're all probably wondering what I think about it, since it's gone on to be rather panned. And I do usually tell you right up front how I feel. But I can't do that here, because I don't know how I feel towards this episode. And that has nothing to do with any of the callbacks or what have you. I don't care that this episode takes place in Rainbow Falls. That's only going to be a problem when Fluttershy is forced to compete in front of an Olympic crowd. And I don't care that Spike wants to trade a comic book. I care about the pieces that work, the pieces that sort of work, and the pieces that really don't. And speaking of pieces that don't really work, no, I'm not talking about Pinky. We'll have plenty of time to talk about her later. I'm talking about the dialogue in this episode. Look, I'd be a hypocrite if I gave this episode a pass and Power Ponies a fail on it, because here, the dialogue is kind of worse. In Power Ponies, all the exposition was unnecessary. Here, it's, We're all going to the Rainbow Falls Traders Exchange! Thank you, Pinky. We've all known this for about a week now.
I'm not just going. We're accompanying a princess on an official royal duty!
Yeah, Pinky, Twilight's been a princess for quite some time now. Thanks for reminding us.
There always has to be a princess at the exchange. Last year was Princess Cadence. This year it's me.
Thank you, Twilight. We already knew this. That's why we're making these plans to go to Rainbow Falls. Rule 1 about exposition, of any kind, is that the characters you are expositioning to should actually, need to be exposed to it. I mean, these are all as-you-know moments, just without the as-you-know. I won't dwell on the dialogue anymore because, at least it's serviceable. And honestly, this review would be pretty boring if I kept harping on one problem, even though it kinda persists throughout the episode. Why is this a problem, though? Besides being trademark bad storytelling, it's rather annoying having Pinky and Twilight think that all the others forgot the purpose of why they're going to Rainbow Falls, while they're at Rainbow Falls. Spike almost drops his comic in the mud, but Twilight saves it. Then he fades into the background for the rest of the episode. Twilight replays some of Twilight time, and yes, there are all sorts of things I can discuss here with why Ponies didn't think she was a princess earlier, and there are all sorts of excuses I can come up with. But there'll be time for that later, and in all honesty, I don't care right now.
There's a pony here who's got a signed first edition of Daring Do and the Quest of the Sapphire statue.
Hey, quick question. Don't you know Daring Do personally? We're not gonna mention that, are we? We remember that Twilight's a princess, we remember Spike at Your Service, we remember Rainbow Falls, but we forget about Daring Don't.
It's the only one in all of Equestria. Oh no.
Okay, then. Did the other first edition copies get, I don't know, burnt in a fire or something? Whatever. Fluttershy accompanies Rainbow Dash, saying that she wants to trade a bear whistle for a bird call, and allows her kindness to be taken advantage of. Didn't we already do this before? Like, really recently? Applejack and Rarity team up to reenact Look Before You Sleep, and like in Look Before You Sleep, it makes them look childish and petty. It also comes off like an afterthought to the episode, like the other stories were too short and they needed to pad it out a little bit. Then we got our third story, which is probably the most enjoyable of the three. Twilight wants to trade away some books, and Pinky joins her. Rainbow Dash wants to trade away a rusty old horseshoe, but predictably, the owner of the book doesn't want it. Speaking of that, let's talk about the predictability complaint. Here's how the chain of deal story usually goes. The guy who has what the main character wants something, but the main character doesn't have it. So they go to another guy who has what the first guy wants, but they don't have what the second guy wants, and so on and so forth. And there is really not much deviation here. Now the question is, does it bother me here? Well, considering that it's balanced out by a story and a half, and it isn't done as much as the plot lines that Haber tends to write about, I'm gonna go with no. Also, it's extremely hard to deviate from the plotline without making it seem insulting, like having the object break or something, leaving the character's shit out of luck. No, that's not what bothers me here. It's how the plot resolves, and we'll talk about it later, of course. So the book lady wants a Diet Cerberus. Diet Cerberus. 2/3 the heads, all of the mythology. We cut back to Rarity and Applejack. Both of them want something incredibly petty, and want to trade all of their combined stuff for it. Rarity wants a brooch that looks exactly like the one she has, since it's slightly older, and Applejack wants a rusty pie tin that cooks things in 5 seconds faster. Scotty, my man. Can I call you that? I see what you're going for here. You made, or at least tried to, make each of their desires equally petty, and tried to make the argument look petty by result. But instead, it only ends up making Applejack and Rarity look petty. Here's an idea. Make them want something that would actually be valuable to either of them, but hard for the other to see regardless, like the thread that Rarity used in Rarity Takes Manhattan, or a serum that would allow Applejack to grow an apple like she had in Bats. It would have made their motivation stronger, it would have made them seem less petty, and it would have made the moral you tried to teach with them even stronger.
Ha! You're bluffing.
Am I? How can you tell?
Well, because...
I will give you this though, the comedy in this episode is pretty spot on. Fluttershy goes and calms down the Diet Cerberus, and the guy wants to trade for a lamp. The lamp guy wants to trade for an antique chicken? Wonder where that cockatrice got to. Do I have to? It's not even worth dignifying. Besides, we've already been through all these hoops before. Blah blah, more police think that inclusion of a disabled person thinks that it equals insulting of a disabled person. Blah blah blah. We could apply this to any character in the show, blah blah blah. This is sexist because it contains female characters, blah blah blah. This is immoral, apparently, despite coming from a Make-A-Wish foundation that helps grant the wishes of dying children, blah blah blah. He who fights monsters, blah blah blah. No, they won't censor it this time because he's integral to the plot, unlike Derpy Hooves was in the last roundup, most likely as a result of experience with this thing, blah blah blah. He's not offensive because the characters treat him equally and don't even react from blah blah blah, hypocrisy, blah blah blah. Anything else? Blah blah blah. Okay, can we please move on? The antique chicken guy wants a crystal chalice. The crystal chalice guy wants a spool of golden thread. The golden thread guy wants a beached whale. The beached whale guy wants a time machine. Actually, the crystal chalice guy wants the rusty horseshoe. I kinda thought that this plotline would go a little bit further. I also kinda thought that someone who wasn't a merchant, like a kid, would trade for the horseshoe, and Rainbow would realize the value of a good trade, and how somebody feels during a dishonest one. And then the chalice breaks. We cut to our final story, where a kid wants to trade a broken pen for all of Twilight's books. Pinkie rushes in and stops the trade. It has a purpose. It didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't really hurt anyone. She's actually kind of justified. And here's the most important thing. The narrative points to this being out of the norm. Must I elaborate further? Back to the other story. They bring the chalice to the chicken guy, and then the episode puts more emphasis on Fluttershy's lack of assertiveness, even though she's kind of climbed past that point. The lamp guy apparently went out to lunch. Pinkie starts channeling G3 Spike, and Fluttershy and Rainbow catch up to the lamp guy. To hurry the line, they start cooking. Then they trade the lamp for the Diet Cerberus.
I am way too generous to let you outfriend me like that!
We're really doing this again. Really. Fluttershy uses her bear whistle, which I thought that the plot had forgotten about, to clear out the crowd. While pulling the Diet Cerberus, Fluttershy loses the call. Now, the episode actually has been putting more emphasis on Fluttershy's soft-spoken nature than Rainbow's lack of awareness. So I kind of expected that to actually be, the lesson. In fact, I kind of think that they should have gone that way. Because, my god, do they really drop the ball here. The book person doesn't want the Diet Cerberus anymore.
I've been watching that thing over in the Ancient Beast booth. It's crazy!
I love how you made that decision only after Fluttershy calmed it down. No, this legitimately bothers me. She wants it when it's vicious and destroying things. So she tells these two that she wants it. Then Fluttershy calms it down, and only now she thinks it's crazy.
If she comes and stays with us in Manhattan until it's trained.
Okay, and now we've gotten to the truly infamous part of this episode. I don't think it's as bad as other people say, but yes, it's pretty bad, the worst part of the episode, mostly because it's terribly executed. Like I already said, it seemed to be shoved in out of nowhere, most likely because Scott forgot he needed a moral for these two. Secondly, Rainbow's obliviousness to Fluttershy was never really the focus of the episode. By doing this now, the episode is saying that Fluttershy's soft-spoken nature isn't the problem. In fact, it's borderline saying that Fluttershy doesn't have any autonomy. Speaking of Rainbow's obliviousness, Scott could have, and should have, made it so that Rainbow didn't hear the deal properly. Instead, it looks like she traded away Fluttershy. I mean, I could have tolerated this moment if it was made clear that it was an accident, which would have taken only 2 words. Instead, it looks like Rainbow not only values a book more than their friendship, but values it more than Fluttershy as a person. Not to mention that Rainbow Dash has a personal connection to Daring Do. So we get to the best of the 3 plots. But even that has to run into the ground somehow. Pinkie raises the value of Twilight's books too high and everyone walks away.
This is the one I was so absorbed in the day Spike decided he owed Applejack a life debt.
Seriously, who references Spike at your service?
I may not ever need to read these again, but that doesn't mean they don't have value. I realize that now.
Yeah, that philosophy often leads to hoarding, just saying. I mean, you could have done something other than shoehorn in random sentiment. Rainbow goes to Twilight to get the trade called off, and somehow it works! It's a little bit less convoluted than the ending of Games Ponies Play. Then we have some random smalts about how friends are more important than physical objects. Something you'd have to be pretty petty to believe in the first place. Speaking of petty...
I know it's not the pie tin you were after, but I hope you like it. It's the rustiest piece of junk I could get.
I got you something as petty as you are.
Well, I took my half of our stash and got you this. And I know you're gonna love it, because you already have a bunch of ones that look exactly the same sitting in a drawer doing nothing.
What a coincidence. I got you something just as petty. And Fluttershy gets what she wants because apparently not standing up for yourself isn't a problem that should be addressed. So I can be harsh on episodes that I like. I spent this entire review pretty much railing against the episode, and yet I still kind of like it. Why? Because you really only get into the problems when you do some scrutiny. When I watch an episode for the first time, I don't really do it with my critical faculties on, and I can still enjoy this particular episode with them off. Rainbow and Fluttershy go through a plot type that I like and I want to see more of. Applejack and Rarity's plot is rather short and doesn't overstay its welcome, like it did for me in Look Before You Sleep. Piggy's assertive side being well written for once was enough to distract me from some of the more mediocre parts of the episode. By the way, I found the callbacks to the episodes that I don't like fairly amusing, almost as if Scott was challenging me to hate this episode. Oh yeah, it's a bad episode. Rainbow looks like an idiot at best and a monster at worst. Fluttershy's character backpedals to the pilot, and this is after Rainbow Falls, where she's willing to compete athletically in front of an Olympic crowd. One moral comes out of nowhere, one moral makes the two characters seem petty, and the final one could be misconstrued as harmful. Is it better than Some Pony to Watch Over Me? That depends. Which do you think is worse? One large, persistent problem, or about a dozen small problems that come in and out? More importantly though, after his first two episodes being a failure, do I think that Scott Sonneborn is right for this show? Maybe. It's too soon to tell. I mean, look at Meriwether Williams' track record. She didn't break out of her reputation until this season. Give him time. If he decides to stay, he'll get his flow eventually. Or he won't. Only time will tell. So what do we got next week? Kinda feel like that might be a metaphor for something.